Hello, Titans, and welcome to another episode of In Focus. I'm your host, Julianne Lina. Today we are spotlighting Dr. Mei-Ling Malone, an assistant professor of African American Studies here at Cal State Fullerton. Dr. Malone's work centers on urban education, social justice, and equity, bridging scholarship with community engagement. As a mentor, advisor, and other many things, she's committed to uplifting student voices and creating meaningful change, both inside and outside the classroom. Dr. Malone, thank you so much for joining us.
It's an honor to be here.
And we are so excited to have you here, so let's get right to it. You've credited your father for teaching you a lot about African American history, and I've taken that to the classroom, emphasizing your passion about teaching truth, equality, and justice when talking to your students and especially your own children.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that inspiration stems from your father, and what do you hope you can teach to your students and your children?
That's a great question. I feel like so much of what my father did for myself and my brothers and sisters and I as a child in terms of learning about our Black history really informed who I am today as a person. So first, because I'm racially ambiguous, I'll explain that my father is Black and my mom is Chinese. And my father had the insight to know that my K through 12 education would fail me in terms of teaching me about the complexities and the fullness of Black history, of Black contributions, and contemporary issues facing the Black community. So I remember being a really young kid, and he filled our homes with all of these books about Black activists, about slavery, about the civil rights movement. And I remember as early as elementary school, he would have my siblings and I read a book a week and write him a book report. So I was learning about Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, really early on. And a part of me, when I was a kid, I couldn't fully appreciate that gift. I was like, oh, I already have my other homework, and now Dad wants me to read this and write this. But at the same time, that was such a gift because it was really planting seeds and really exposing me. I was really kind of disturbed reading about the challenges of the world, but also deeply inspired seeing all these courageous people dedicate their life to fighting for a better humanity. And that really stuck with me. So a part of me feels like I've been majoring in African American studies my whole life. And I feel like I'm just full circle. So what I was able to experience in my childhood is now what I do for a living. So I try to give that same gift to my students in terms of more exposure on history, current events, and then most importantly, how to use that information to fight for a better world in the here and now. Yeah.
So sweet. And just building off of that, why do you think African American studies is especially important for students to engage with, considering today's social and political climate?
That's a really good question. I think no matter what your major is, I feel like all students can benefit from learning about African American studies for a lot of reasons. For one, it forces students to confront difficult and hard truths that I feel like mainstream society isn't informing us of. So I feel like inherently we study oppression and discrimination and marginalization. And we get past this idea that typically tells us that racism was really bad in the past and now it's much better today. And I think a lot of people think racism just involves an individual disliking another individual of a race, or that all racist people live in red states, or all the racist people are the old people, and once they pass on, society will be better. And I think when you get to African American studies, you realize it's much deeper than that. You see how whole systems and structures and institutions are also reinforcing racism all the time. So like the entire healthcare system or the housing market fails to treat Black folks with the same dignity and fairness and equity, and clear across the board. We kind of learn about and we see how Black folks have less than ideal outcomes that can't be explained away other than that race and racism continues to be a significant factor. So of course, we start at the beginning. We see that our United States nation was founded on anti-Blackness, right, with slavery and segregation, but how even today our policing system, our prison system is perpetuating anti-Blackness, and that it preys upon working class, vulnerable communities, Black and Latinx communities, and that the prison system is also tied to generating profit. I think some people don't recognize the magnitude of that, those disproportionate numbers. I think students also don't realize that a 2019 study found that for young Black males, being murdered by the police is a leading cause of death. When you don't know this information, you can't really have informed conversations about how to address problems. But when you're in African American studies and you see the history and you see the current challenges, then you're better able to be thinking about, like, how can we do things differently instead of trying to come up with solutions from a historically inaccurate perspective, or a perspective that lacks the nuance to see what's really going on. Also, I think African American studies is intersectional by nature, meaning that we look at compounding forms of marginalization that people go through. So being a woman and Black, or being queer and poor, the ways in which you can't separate out someone's total experience with the different ways that they face oppression. So not only are you learning about the Black community, but you're also inherently learning about sexism and patriarchy, about homophobia and transphobia, ableism, classism, really all of these ways in which people are harmed. And not only that, I feel like African American studies, once you have this critical understanding of how the power structure works, how oppression works, you can look at other issues and more easily understand when things are problematic and why they're problematic in this history. So if we're thinking about these current ICE raids, I think once you have that African American studies lens, you're able to see, okay, what's happening now is connected to a longer history of very overtly racist immigration policies, and that what's happening today, even though backed by the political administration, is deeply inhumane and unconstitutional. And I just think that African American studies gives you that gift to really look at all communities and all groups, and to ask these hard questions about who's being harmed and why and how we can move forward. And then finally, I feel like when you study African American studies, you also look at kind of what I did in my childhood. You look at activists, you look at social movements, you look at the community coming together to call out these injustices and to bravely fight for a better world. So I think that leaves students with, like, oh, I have agency. Oh, I can stand up to, I can be courageous. I can use my voice to do these things. I'm not resigned to live in this very cruel world that I just have to survive, that we can be a part of that change. So
That's so insightful, and I love that you brought up intersectionality and also just, talking about how stereotypes are being perpetuated over the years. So it was super insightful.
Thank you.
And considering your role as an assistant professor in African American Studies is a significant position that focuses heavily on student engagement, mentorship, and integrating activism into education. Personally, what kind of contributions do you have as an assistant professor to help achieve those goals for your students?
I love this question too. I'm just someone who passionately loves teaching. I really do. That exposure to critical thinking and history. And equally, I think it's important to be engaged with student activist movements in the here and now, to be fighting for change in real time. It feels a little bit incomplete if I'm just teaching, but not also taking actions. So I feel like by being involved in activist efforts and working closely with students, I'm able to bring that into the classroom. When I'm teaching these ideas about, say, defunding the police, I'm able to say, and this is the work that your peers are doing, and this is how I was able to help with this effort. If I can give one example, during the height of 2020, I know internationally, communities all over the world were talking about Black Lives Matter after the really tragic death of George Floyd. And people were fed up and people were demanding change. And all systems are interlocked, and we have a policing system on our campus as well. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that policing at Cal State Fullerton gets a significant budget that is much higher than, say, for like even student health, mental health services caps. So when I was doing this work, we found that Cal State Fullerton's policing budget was like 6 million, and then the caps was like 1 million, and the entire diversity initiatives resource centers combined was under 500,000. Women's, I think the women's center was given, I don't want to misquote any of these numbers, but the point being engaged in work to defund the police is coming from a very real place and a really informed place. So let me backpedal because I feel like I'm probably confusing you or losing you a little bit. But during 2020, during the height of kind of this conversation about police brutality, two students right here at Cal State Fullerton that were students, a part of Students for Quality Education, they decided, let's write a resolution to defund and demilitarize our own campus police, right? Let's start where we are to create change, and hopefully everyone is creating change in their community, and hopefully that will help us see a different world. And they asked me and two other amazing faculty, and I want to say 3 other students, so there was about 8 of us working on this resolution that we were going to bring before ASI. And I was like, sure, I'll definitely help with this. And in my mind, I didn't think that it would pass, but I felt like this work is important just to raise critical consciousness. It turns out that this resolution did, in fact, pass in 2021 right here on our campus, proving that students do want change. But a part of that work on the resolution, I was in charge of kind of figuring out what our students' experiences with campus police. And while sad, but not surprising, you know, students were saying, hey, sometimes I'm in the parking structure and campus police ask me to pull over and show ID and ask me where I'm going or why I'm here and things like that. And so I'm able to bring into the classroom and say, these are what your fellow peers are saying that's happening to them. So instead of learning about defunding the police from such like this abstract concept, they're seeing how it's impacting them and their campus and their tuition dollars and their fellow classmates and what's going on. And they're seeing that their professor is actively engaged in this work. And I think role modeling is a great way to promote activism and show people that, like, oh, this is possible for me to get involved in as well, instead of we're just like thinking about things in this classroom and learning, and then I go back to my real life. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing information about our own campus that I didn't even know about, and
Okay.
I'm sure most of our viewers probably did not know about, but I'm glad that resolution has passed, and that's so inspiring. Considering that we just talked about your leadership role, in the Black Student Union, where you have provided guidance and support for the organization, besides the resolution, can you tell us about what the experience has been like and what future goals you have for the organization?
I would love to talk about the Black Student Union. It's been such an honor to work with them. I really feel like it was seeing Black students' courage that really made it easier to be courageous myself. I was like, well, if they can speak out and do all of these things, then I, at least as a faculty member, need to back them and do my part. I would just love to share a little bit about their work. So even before I served as a faculty advisor for the BSU, In the fall of 2019, a campus fraternity here posted an event flyer, and they had the N-word on it in the corner of their flyer, and they circulated around social media. And the BSU saw that, and obviously that was hurtful and not a good experience. But at the same time, it wasn't an isolated event. It really served as a tipping point for Black students here at Cal State Fullerton to say, like, there's a major issue with anti-Blackness in our culture on campus, and we need more infrastructure. We need more real support so that students can be safe and that students can thrive. And I watched them courageously come together and hold a town hall meeting where the former president was there, and a lot of people across the entire campus came, students of all backgrounds, faculty of all backgrounds, and they one by one spoke out about their different experiences, students talking about turning in a paper and the professor saying, "Did you really write this paper? This paper is really good." All of these horrible, I don't even want to call them microaggressions because those things are really harmful. But they also ended up writing a list of demands. They said, we don't simply just want a statement apology. Like, we can do without that. We want real change. And so they said, we want to hire more Black mental health therapists, counselors on campus. They said, we want Black-themed housing, which we now have, the Ujima floor on campus. They said, we want more scholarships for Black students. And there was about 11 items. And long story short, through their courage and through their organization, they got most of the things that they advocated for. And that's been incredible to watch. And I just had to share that story because I feel like most people don't know the history. You might come in and maybe you now are able to live on the Ujima floor, but you don't know that it was students fighting for that change and to make that happen. Anyways, I guess I share that to say it's been extremely rewarding and really beautiful to be a part of. And I just hope that the Black Student Union continues being courageous, continues making change. And also I just see them dreaming big. I see them creating these amazing programs that I just would never be able to even imagine myself. I watched two of the BSU past co-chairs create the Black Titan experience, where they essentially created this Black resource fair where all of these different groups, all the organizations, they have their little booths, they're on the ECS lawn, they have a DJ, there's live music, there's food trucks, there's dancing, there's music, there's, community and smiles, and also just real information. And it's a huge, huge, huge event. Lots of people come to it, and it's really successful. And I'm like, wow, it's beautiful to see them just feel empowered. Like, we're not gonna shy away. We're not gonna hide ourselves. This is who we are. Interestingly enough, after the first Black Titan event, I want to say the next day or a day after, someone spray painted a dumpster in university-affiliated housing across the street with no N-words. And that was unfortunate, and we rallied together, and we had another town hall, and we spoke out about that. But that has never stopped the BSU from continuing to really have these beautiful, big Black Joy events. I think they also created Black Sound Amplified. I might be messing up the name, but a program for people to come together and to listen to live music, vendors, food, all the things. So I hope they just keep doing their thing. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all that information about the BSU. It's so sad to see that the past events that have happened, but it's so nice to see you guys come together and overcome those things. And considering that you are a doctor and you have all these accolades, it's so inspiring to see that you're still inspired by them.
Oh, of course.
So,
Yeah.
so sweet. And just going on to another question, but what challenges besides those ones do you see students at Cal State Fullerton facing today? And how can education be a tool for empowerment during their college experience?
That's a good question. I see that students are struggling with their mental health. I see that students are struggling with juggling family responsibilities and work and school all together. I see that some students are struggling financially. Um, and of course, I feel like I see marginalized students that feel isolated on campus. And I think young folks unfairly have a lot of pressure put on them that is just really adds to their stress in a way that is unnecessary and harmful. Um, I hope education can be a healing force. I hope that African American studies, Chicano studies, Asian American studies, women's studies, other progressive courses can remind them of their humanity, can empower them to keep going, and also help like heal some of the stuff that they've been through. I hope that it helps make sense of maybe their own difficult upbringing, say maybe attending an underfunded school that just really lacked resources and programs and counselors and things like that, or living in a city that was over policed, or if students of color grew up wishing they had lighter skin, right? Recognizing where that pressure and those ideas came from and how that they can reject that now and really embrace their own authenticity and their own beauty and exactly who they are. So I also just hope that professors are really compassionate and caring. I think that's what students need now more than ever. And I think that truly is by itself a very healing force. So I hope that um, the faculty side, I hope we're really good to them. And I hope that all of us and the education helps heal and empower them to continue moving forward in life.
And just using that information, personally, how do you encourage students to think critically and connect what they learn in the classroom to the world around them?
Yeah, that's really the key. That's really essentially all I care about and why I'm here. I actually don't even believe in grades. Um, but there's two things that I like to do. One, I created something called a racial justice project. And it's this idea that instead of just learning about injustices in the classroom, that they can pick a specific topic that's interesting to them and research it more closely, and then also find a relevant person to interview about their topic. And so they're doing this original research, but most importantly, after they've found a topic, researched it, interviewed someone, they're tasked with creating a real doable action plan of like how to address these challenges. And I've always been wowed every semester seeing the ideas that students come up with. But it definitely kind of not gently, but very like, here you go, there's stuff happening. What can we do about these things? And they're tasked to sit there and think like, okay, I can do X, Y, and Z, or we can do this collectively together. That we don't just have to think about these difficult things happening, but that these are things that we can do. Also, I end every class with a lesson on allyship and solidarity. I let my students know that, hey, I'm just another person. They never have to agree with me. I know I have some pretty strong opinions about what I'd like to see in the world, and understandably, not every student is on board with, say, abolition or something like that. But I do take a pretty hard stance in terms of, I let them know that I don't believe there's an idea of neutrality when it comes to the matters of human life. I think you're either actively trying to support communities or you're unintentionally, passively. So I don't even think there's any malicious intent behind it, but you're accepting that other groups are going through struggles. So I let them know, hey, we belong to one another, we're connected to each other, and that all of us play a role in supporting each other. And I, pretty much explain all of us are probably privileged in some ways and marginalized in others. And wherever we end up having privileges, it doesn't make us a bad person. It's nothing to feel guilty about. but that we can speak out. So if family members are making, transphobic jokes, you don't laugh or go along with it. You take the time to patiently and kindly explain how their actions are harmful to others. Or if you're at work and you see that there's a Black person applying for a job who's qualified, but that the manager is like kind of disregarding that you would say something. So the whole point of the class is to get more awareness about social injustices, but it's all leading up to, and this is what we, for the rest of our lives, can do to help resist these things and create a more loving, more beautiful, humane world for all of us. Yeah.
I can totally see the passion.
You
It's
really
amazing.
are passionate, thank you.
And I can tell through your teaching, you force your students to think critically, but you're also there to support them. So I think that's amazing. And I'm so excited to hear your response for this last question. And personally, what do you hope students take with them after leaving your class, beyond grades, beyond academic knowledge?
Yeah, that's a beautiful last question to ask. I hope, if nothing else, students felt cared for and supported, honestly. If students didn't learn anything in my entire class, I hope that at least they had an experience where they felt like the professor was kind and on their side and loved them. And I know typically you're not allowed to say love in a workspace. It's supposed to be like this sterile, cold separation. But like the late Bell Hooks she spoke about this pedagogy of love. So yes, I want to fight oppression and have my students think critically, but I also want to embody that. I want to be deeply compassionate and humane with them. I want them to know that it's okay to disagree, that it's a safe space, that if there's challenges in their life, I'm not having these strict and rigid rules about, turning in assignments and things like that. I want them to know that they have someone rooting for them and that they don't need to come in and like earn a spot on my good side or anything like that. Because I feel like in traditional education spaces, educators have this power over students. And I think that's part of the problem. And I want to deconstruct that in the way that I move in the classroom. So I want them to have a kind professor more than anything. And equally, I want them to know that social justice and the mental health field are not separate, that they're like deeply interlocked, and that loving themselves, not in a superficial or cheesy way, is important to the movement as well. I truly believe that like world peace starts with inner peace. And so that even if students struggle to be an ally to another community, start with being an ally to yourself. Start with affirming yourself. That loving nature in a society like ours that tells us like, oh, you need to earn X, Y, and Z, you need to prove yourself, you need to get this status, you need to get this title, all of these things, I think leaves us all in a difficult space. I think it robs us of our peace and our joy, and I think it creates a lot of depression and anxiety. And part of fighting for this better world is also just taking really good care of ourselves and resisting the messaging out there that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough. So it sounds simple, but I want students to know that they are good enough. Just being themselves, their essence, who they are, no achievements, no nothing, no when you get this job, when you get this partner, when you have these kids, when you buy the house, but that they are beautiful, and to really just honor their time on earth. Yeah.
That is so empowering. Amazing words. And it was such a pleasure speaking with you today, Dr. Malone. I'm definitely so inspired about the work that you have already completed and still continue to do. Well, that is all the time we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us on another special episode of In Focus. We would also like to extend our deepest gratitude to our guest, Dr. Mei-Ling Malone, for sharing her advice and guidance with us. Until next time, I'm Julianne Lina, and this has been In Focus.